What is good, Raider Nation? It's your boy Sanjit back at it with another video. The Raiders have officially lost, man. Who's surprised at this point, man? What an awful season for the Raiders. 2-8. Uh, it's just not good football right now. You know what's crazy about this season is coming in there was real hope for this team, and I think it pretty much. I think the Raiders pretty much lost this season as soon as they decided that we're not going to revamp the offensive line. And we're now on the other side of this where, the offensive line never got revamped, and we kind of see that now, right? We see it when teams just come out here and beat the crap out of the Raiders. Like, we can't even run our offense. That's how bad it is at this point, right? Um, and what do you do if you're the Raiders? Do you say, hey, let's fire every single one of these coaches? Let's just move off of all these guys and, let's potentially change and go with someone else? I really don't know. It's really unfortunate at this point. Yeah, it's wild, man. It's really, really, really wild. See our guys' comments kind of coming in. Um, the Raiders currently hold the sixth overall pick according to draft or Tankathon. Sixth overall pick, man. It's not gonna get you a quarterback. I don't even know, man. I don't even know if a quarterback fixes the Raiders at this point. Let's get into some of these comments, man. It's just really unfortunate. Raiders versus everybody says absolutely embarrassing. Could not agree more. Um, it's just unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. And what's crazy is before the season started, this was one of the games I was really excited about. Monday Night Football, prime time, Raiders, Cowboys. I already knew the Cowboys were going to be a good football team. I thought maybe the Raiders would be good at this point as well. And that's as Carmlog says, there's nothing good saying Jeet. Could not agree more. Fire everybody but Patrick Graham. What do we do, at this point? Like, do you make Patrick Graham your head coach, your interim head coach at least? And, then I don't know. I really don't know how to figure this out. It really is. It should have started in the offseason. It should have started with the revamped offensive line. That is where the Raiders made a mistake. And it's crazy because we talked about this during the draft, even before the draft, right? Like free agency, we literally talked about how if the Raiders don't revamp their offensive line, they're going to struggle. And remember, they only signed Alex Kappa. That was the only guy that they decided to kind of bring in. And we talked about this at that point, that this is not good enough. Alex Kappa is not good enough to fix the issues that the offensive line had. And what's happening now is the offensive line cannot hold up. So, Geno Smith can't throw the ball. Chip Kelly can't call his plays. Like, if you can't have Jim Harbaugh said this. I believe he said it at the beginning of this season, or he may have said it when he came to the Chargers last year. But he literally said, you literally can't run the football without an offensive line. You can't throw the football without an offensive line. Like, the offensive line controls everything that happens on your offense, and it's a fact. You literally cannot run your offense without the offensive lineman blocking. If they can't hold up for 3.5 seconds, your routes are not going to develop downfield. And that's happening. Like, the only time the Raiders pick up yards is when they play action and they bootleg, or they play action, they suck in the linebackers, and they hit it right behind those linebackers. That's the only way we're able to pick up any plays. We can't run a basic dagger concept, and the quarterback can't sit back there cleanly and make the pass. We literally cannot run any type of offense right now. And it's just unfortunate, man. As Tam19939 says, offensive line not being addressed this offseason is a crime. I could not agree more, man. The offensive line to me is easily the biggest issue with the Raiders right now. And the unfortunate thing is we're going to go into this offseason. I don't think we're going to draft the quarterback. I shouldn't say I'm pretty sure, but based off what I heard, we're not drafting a quarterback. So the Raiders are going to go into this offseason, and the offensive tackle class is kind of on the weaker side. I think there's only one guy that I really want, which is going to be Spencer Fano coming out of Utah. Even then, like, if we get the 6th or 7th overall pick, I could see a team like the Giants saying, hey, we need an offensive tackle. I could see a team like the Cleveland Browns or the New York Jets might come out there and say, hey, we want to take an offensive tackle, right? I don't know. I don't know what's going to end up happening. What are the chances Pete Carroll gets fired like tomorrow? I think it's a very, very low chance, to be honest. Josh McDaniels got a year and like 4 or 5 games, however long it kind of was. It's I don't think he's going to get fired. I see a lot of people talking about the offensive line and Ashton Jeanty struggling. I see a lot of people talking and saying, "Hey, Ashton Jeanty, the Raiders aren't running the football enough." We're not running the ball because we literally cannot run the ball. We can't have success. We're not going to have success running the football. Will Putnam's like 250 pounds. Dylan Parham's like 260, and Jordan Meredith is like 275. That's not strong enough on the inside, right? It's just not. We have guys that are built. We have like 3 centers basically playing right now, center guard and left guard and right guard. Our guys are too weak. You have to have people movers in the NFL because if you don't, or the defense on the other side, we'll have those guys. And the Raiders got handled, like straight manhandled today. And it's crazy because we haven't even watched the tape, but just watching that game live, like, I'm pretty sure I saw multiple times where our center today, Will Putnam, ended up kind of getting tossed around. That's crazy, man. It is absolutely crazy. Raider Robert said, "Bro, I feel like crying." I hear you, man. I hear you. It's crazy because we put so much effort into this team, into this roster, into this game, and like we had, Reggie McKenzie was, I think he was a pretty good general manager. He did a lot of good things for the Raiders, and Mark Davis decided that, hey, we're going to go away from the Reggie McKenzie era and we're going to get into this John Gruden era, and things kind of went downhill from that point. John Gruden restarted and kind of redid his own thing. 5-6 years into it, really didn't have success. He ends up resigning. Then we start with this Josh McDaniels era. None of these eras have really ever worked out, and it's crazy to me because you look at certain teams out there. Certain teams just know how to draft. The Bears a couple years ago hired Ryan Poles, and literally within his first 2 drafts, I was saying it that this guy knows what he's doing. You can just tell he's drafting the right players. You can just see it. And here we are a couple years later, and the Bears are, I believe they're 7-3. I believe, don't quote me on that, but you can just tell teams that know how to draft. The Baltimore Ravens over and over and over again. These guys just hit on their pick. The picks, Los Angeles Rams. And then you have the Raiders, who literally cannot draft and just cannot draft right. And it's not one regime because we've had like, the Mayock and Gruden regime. We've had the Josh McDaniels regime. Tom Telesco did a really nice job for the Raiders. And we'll see with John Spytek. I do like some of the picks, but it almost feels like, John Spytek wants to revamp the team and build for the long term while Pete Carroll wants to build to win now. It almost seems like there's 2 different directions and 2 different guys pulling at this point. And the Pete Carroll, let's kind of go all in. It's not working at this point, right? And thankfully, we have John Spytek, who's kind of, I don't know if the player's going to end up being good, but at least he's made some picks that I have faith in, right? I think Jack Bech is going to end up working out based off what we've kind of seen. And we'll see on that one. But the one I really like is Charles Grant, right? That's the one that I like. That's the one that I think is going to end up working out. That's the one that I would be confident in, right? And then, of course, Ashton Jeanty should be good enough as well. Kurt Hardy said Alex Kappa is good enough to compete with Jack Sparrows-Johnson, but gets benched for Will Putnam. I agree, man. It does not make sense. Like, can someone explain this comment right here to me? Because it just does not make sense. Alex Kappa, JPJ has to, compete with him week in, week out. And then when JPJ gets hurt, there's no competition. And Alex Kappa's literally benched for Will Putnam. That does not make sense to me. That is wild. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, man. This comment right here is wild. But kind of just goes to show that we're at the point where Pete Carroll is definitely, he definitely has some issues with some players. And, we've seen Jermaine Pratt obviously ended up getting released, and he's having a phenomenal bounce back to his career with the Colts. I don't know if the Colts played this week, but the last 2 weeks, I believe, like I saw him all out, out there dominating essentially, right, making plays. It just does not make sense to me. It's just wild. It's crazy, man. Eat weights all day. That pocket was garbage. Gino was scrambling. I agree, man. Look, you can say like the play calling's not great, but until you have an offensive line to protect the quarterback and for the play caller to actually be able to call those plays. Until the play caller has a real chance, you can't say he's garbage or he's bad or he's not good enough. Same thing with the quarterback. I think Geno Smith, and you see glimpses, you see flashes of Geno Smith being a good quarterback, but I think the offensive line is just really, really poor at this point. We play the Cleveland Browns next week, and the Cleveland Browns will have Shedeur Sanders as their quarterback. There's a real chance Shedeur Sanders will throw for like 500 yards against the Raiders. He's going to look like the next elite quarterback. There's a real chance it's going to end up happening with Shedeur. Terrell Rader said, if the draft were tomorrow, who would you select? That's a hard question because, even if we can get the number one quarterback coming out this class, I don't know if I would say, quarterback is more of a need right now than fixing that offensive line. And the thing is like, we have Colt Miller, so Colt Miller should be back at some point. And I have faith in Charles Grant. I do think Charles Grant's going to develop into a franchise guy. And I don't just say that, right? Like, when Thayer Munford was our right tackle, I told you guys I don't think he's a franchise guy. When DJ Glaze came in last year, a lot of people disagreed with me and crushed me for this, right? People, like, literally were like, hey, I'm unsubscribing to you because you're too negative. But I was literally telling you guys, I don't think DJ Glaze is the franchise guy either. On the other side of it, I think Charles Grant is, at least he has more upside than DJ Glaze or Thayer Munford ever showed me. So I have more faith in him. So with that, do the Raiders draft the right tackle, right? Because do you go with the right tackle or do you say let's get the quarterback? Honestly, I think the best thing the Raiders can do is take the wide receiver out of Arizona State. I think if you have a big play wide receiver, you have we already have a big play tight end and running back. You have the tackles, right? You just got to play them. And obviously, Colt Miller has to be healthy. I would rather go down the path of where you have an explosive offensive, group of guys. Because worst case scenario, if you have a top 5 running back, you have a top 5 tight end. If I think his name's Tyson out of Arizona State, if he's a top 5 wide receiver, well, you could draft the quarterback in 1 or 2 years if Geno Smith still sucks, and you'll have guys in their prime ready to support that rookie quarterback. And I think that puts you at a better position, right? So that's what I would personally do, right? Robert Sterling, I try to be optimistic, but it is so hard to watch this team, Sanjit. I was hoping to see Caleb Rogers tonight. It's wild to me that they just made this guy a healthy scratch. Like, I know you guys saw the video, so I definitely saw him. Caleb Rogers literally was excited to potentially have an opportunity to play. And the Raiders decided, right? Pete Carroll decided, hey, I don't want people screaming for Caleb Rogers in the middle of the game. So what we're going to do is we're going to just make him a healthy scratch. And I think was it Antonio Maffei? I believe it was Maffei that they ended up activating. To me, it just makes no sense. If Will Putnam or Jordan Merritt struggled, which both guys struggled, Caleb Rogers, let the guy have some reps, man. Let the guy have some snaps. At this point, what do you really have to lose? If the Raiders were smart, they would look to just try taking the rest of the season straight up. And it's crazy because we're playing Cleveland next week. We're both 2-8. One of these teams is going to end up with 3 wins. And Cleveland right now has the number 3 overall pick. So if Cleveland beats us, the Raiders jump up to number 5. And I believe the Jets and Giants play, or maybe it's the Giants and New Orleans Saints. One of those 2 teams play as well in the next couple weeks. So there's a real chance the Raiders end up jumping up to like pick 4 at this point. It is hard to be optimistic, man. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I cover the Raiders. It's literally my full-time work at this point, or at least it will be in the next couple of weeks, where we're literally relying on this to take care of my family. And it's one of those things where it's so hard to just continue watching this team and continue supporting this team when it just does not look good, right? And there's nothing to really even look forward to at this point. I understand if the Raiders said, hey, there's 6-7 games left. Let's go forward with Charles Grant. Let's go forward with Caleb Rogers. Let's see what Cam Miller or one of these other quarterbacks, Kenny Pickett, might have. It's hard to be optimistic when your coaching staff is putting the same group of guys out there that you guys know this, and I definitely know this. This group is bad. They're not going to win football games. What's the point of watching Stone Forsythe get his ass kicked? What's the point of that? What's the point of watching DJ Glaze? Maybe Glaze is a little bit different, but like, what's the point of watching these guys when they're not going to be here next year? It's crazy to think this, but of the 5 guys starting today, right? Forsythe, Dylan Parham, Will Putnam, Jordan Meredith, DJ Glaze. There's a real chance none of these 5 guys will be starting next year. Some of them might not even be on a roster realistically, right? There's a real chance some of these guys are not playing football next year. And these guys are essentially starting for the Raiders, right? It's really, really, really unfortunate at this point. And I apologize if I miss any super chats. The chat's kind of going by a little fast here. I'm gonna try going through this a little bit quicker. Chip still thinks he has Ohio State's O line. It's crazy because people have kind of pointed out that Chip Kelly runs his offense the way you would in college, and it's kind of leading to the Raiders not having success. I do think he's kind of changed and kind of gotten away from that at this point. Uh, Darrell AS said live from Yuba City. How much cap space do you anticipate? And will the general manager focus on the offensive help in 2026? Will we use first pick on the quarterback? Shout out to you, man. Shout out to you as well. The Raiders have how much do we have? We have 86 million in dead cap, right? So just straight up in dead cap, 86 million. I'm sure at least half of that's going to clear up. I don't know the exact numbers on the top of my head. We'll probably have like 40, $50 million going into next season. We do have a lot of expiring contracts. So although we might have, like some of the most cap in the NFL, a lot of that's going to kind of just go away, right? A lot of that's going to end up going back to re-signing guys like I believe Jeremy Chin's on a 1-year contract, Malcolm Koonce on a 1-year contract. So a lot of this money is going to go towards some of these guys. I do think the Raiders general manager will look to revamp the offensive line, right? I do think John Spytek sees kind of what we see. At the end of the day, he's a general manager. He has a lot of experience in this. I think he understands the Raiders have to revamp the offensive line. I also think he on purpose probably did not revamp the offensive line, understanding that this was probably going to be a tank year. Although Pete Carroll might not wanted that to be the case, I think there's a chance John Spytek already kind of knew that, right? Shout out to all you guys for the super chats. There's been a couple of you guys that have left a super chat without a comment. So shout out to all of you guys. I see a lot of you guys' comments about building through the trenches, and I agree with that, man. If you want to have success, you got to build the trenches. As the super chat just said, does Spytek, is he going to focus on the offensive line? What's crazy about the Raiders is our offensive line could be revamped so quickly, right? Like, it's not even something that would take a long time to really to fix, right? If you guys think about it, we have Colt Miller under contract. We have Charles Grant, who I have faith in. Now, he may struggle in his first year as a true starter. He might give up 10 sacks, but I think you have enough good reps and enough upside where you'll say, hey, he'll develop over time, which is why I think it's so valuable to get him in there now, right? Because the reps he gets now, it's just that much sooner he ends up being he becomes a good offense tackle, right? So you have Colt Miller, you have your right tackle in Charles Grant. JPJ should be the center, right? And I think a better coaching staff makes him your center. Even next year, there's a chance the Raiders kind of roll with him as the center. With DJ Glaze, you can kick him in at one of the guard spots and then just draft another guard. Second round, draft the most physical, most, wants to whoop people's asses. Bring that guard in, put him next to Colt Miller, Colton, whoever that guard is, JPJ, and that's a good, center to left tackle. And then, maybe you put DJ Glaze in at right guard, let Caleb Rogers, him kind of compete. And then right tackle, Charles Grant. That's your O-line right there, right? So we already have some of these guys. So you only need one guard right now if you're the Raiders. So hopefully John Spytek can kind of figure it out. Raider Bottle said, Chip Kelly gives Josh McDaniel vibes. What's crazy about Josh McDaniel is the guy's a pretty good offensive play caller. Obviously, he was a terrible head coach. Chip Kelly's not our head coach, right? So hopefully Chip Kelly at some point, if we revamp the offensive line, if Geno Smith ends up actually being a good quarterback, hopefully he is, Josh McDaniels, or at least as good as Josh McDaniels and what Josh has kind of done for the Patriots this season. And Josh McDaniels, man, his offensive run game is so damn simple. Just heavy power-based concepts, right? Pin pull. They get what's his name? Is it Will Campbell, their left tackle? They get this guy out in space. They run duo, trap, power, lead, right? ISO with the fullback. Chip Kelly, opposite of that, right? Wide zone, outside zone, split zone. completely different in terms of play call. But hopefully Chip Kelly, kind of figures it out. We'll see what ends up happening, right? We'll really see what ends up kind of happening. I see Kamachuka saying Myles Garrett will set the single game sack record next week. I believe he has, 13, 14 sacks already. He had 4 sacks yesterday. He had 5 sacks 2 weeks ago. 9 sacks in 2 games. Wild. He might honestly set the record realistically, right? Chip Kelly does not have a plan, man. Chip Kelly has no plan for these pass rushers. These elite pass rushers. I remember when John Gruden traded Khalil Mack away. I know some of you guys remember this. The first time we played Khalil Mack, John Gruden was like, "Hey, we're gonna make sure this guy does not get after us and like destroy the entire game plan." And we basically just chipped this guy or double teamed him every single play. And the first time the Raiders played Khalil Mack after we traded him, he didn't do much, right? So John Gruden knows how to handle elite pass rushers. Chip Kelly does not, man. Chip Kelly expects Stone Forsythe to go out there and figure it out, right? And there is a chance, though, Colt Miller might actually end up being back, which will help us. Not saying Colt Miller is going to be able to shut down Myles Garrett. In fact, I remember talking to Colt Miller when I did I did an interview with Colt Miller years back, and I asked him who the hardest player in the NFL to block was, and he told me it was Myles Garrett. The hardest player to block. He's too fast and he's too strong, right? And you don't have that combination in anybody else. Some guys are super fast, some guys are super strong. This guy's both, and it makes sense why he's just a superstar, right? It just kind of makes sense. Ray Cruz, I don't understand the pass-heavy offense. The pass-to-run ratio is completely lopsided tonight. Why did we draft Ashton Jeanty? I hear exactly what you're saying, man. But look, one of the things we do have to think about this season is the fact that the Raiders' offensive line sucks. Really, really, really poor. And let me look at the official number of how many times we ran the football. Ashton Jeanty ran the ball 6 times, or he Mostert ran it twice. And Geno had at least 46 dropbacks, 4 sacks. So we had 50 dropbacks to 8 runs, which I agree, man, that is lopsided as hell. But we got to realize that our run game just wasn't working, right? Like it literally was not working. Ashton Jeanty had 6 carries for 7 yards. His longest run was 11 yards. How the hell do you only have 7 yards on 6 carries when your longest run was 11 yards? To me, that's on the offense line. You can blame Chip Kelly for this, but why run the ball when you know it's not going to work? And we tried it. We tried running the ball. It just does not work, right? And that too, the Cowboys had they stacked the box. They're gonna make you throw the ball. They're not gonna let you run the football. So I think part of this was also the Chip Kelly just looked at it like, hey, the run game's not working at this point, and why run it into a stacked box? You might as well just kind of throw it. It is kind of interesting because we had a lot of play action passes behind the defense, and the linebackers are getting sucked in, which is kind of weird because the Raiders hardly run the football, and they're still kind of being sucked in, which is kind of surprising. Wayne, I thought you're not down for tanking. Why are you changing your mind, Net? Is it settling in? It's settled in a while ago, man. The Raiders are not a good football team, man. I settled in probably like 2-3 weeks ago. I think when I saw that game against the Chiefs, to be 100% honest with you, watching how easily the Chiefs picked apart the Raiders defense, I knew in that moment right there, any good offensive coach is going to be able to pick this defense apart. No matter what, even if we have 1 or 2 games where the defense ends up playing well, what the Chiefs did just proved that our defense is broken. The scheme, right? The Pete Carroll defense. If you guys don't know this, Pete Carroll runs a drop based defense, right? It's I forget the technical term, but basically like your linebacker's going to drop 7 yards back on one play. Then you're on the next play, he'll drop back 3 yards or 12 yards. And that's all they do. They just mix up the drops. But at the end of the day, if you're in cover 3, it's easy to beat cover 3. And the Chiefs proved that, right? They had like 30 first downs on the Raiders, which was ridiculous. Could not stop the Kansas City Chiefs. And any good offense, the Cowboys did it today. They dropped 33 points on us. And they could have scored more points, but they ended up kneeing the ball. And, again, it's just one of those things where the defensive scheme is broken. Now, am I for the Raiders tanking? I'm not saying the Raiders should just lose every game or I'm going to root for the Raiders to lose. If the Raiders could lose every game and we get the 5th overall pick, Or if the Raiders win the rest of their games, I'd rather have the Raiders win the rest of their games, right? Because that could lead into next season potentially, right? You finish 9-8 or whatever you can at this point. If you win every single one of your games, sure, you might not have the 14th overall pick, but at least at that point, you know that, hey, this coaching staff can work, this quarterback can work. Maybe the offense line clicks or whatever it is, right? But the year does suck at this point, right? We can't deny that at the end of the day. Anybody with eyeballs knows, man, this season has not went well for the Raiders. And at some point, man, at some point, you just have to be able to figure it out, right? You have to be able to figure it out. You have, the game against the Bears in which you lose because it's a blocked field goal. You have the game against the Broncos. You get a blocked punt. The Jags, you basically don't convert the 2 points. And, those 3 games that you win those 3 games, you're 5-5 at this point, right? Your season's different. The Chiefs are 5-5 right now. They're probably still going to make the playoffs, right? If they fire Pete Carroll after the season, who would you replace him with? That's a hard question. I think Clint Kubiak would be like one of the guys that a lot of people would say, hey, go out there and get Clint Kubiak. The thing is, Clint Kubiak, I think, is a great offensive coordinator. It's a hard thing to say, right? I think like Ben Johnson, for example, you knew Ben Johnson was going to be a great coach. You just saw it in Ben Johnson. And I'm not saying I don't think Clint Kubiak can be a great coach, but it's not guaranteed to work, even if a guy's a great offensive coordinator, right? You got to have that leadership aspect. And like Mike McDaniel, for example, he didn't really have that early on, and maybe this year he has that a little bit more. But it's hard being able to pick a good coach. It really is. Um, you know, there's guys out there that have been fired over the years that I think could be good coaches. Um, Again, it's hard, right? Some people say, "Hey, bring in Mike McCarthy." I don't know. Mike McCarthy kind of reminds me of Pete Carroll almost. I think if the Raiders are going to go out there and get a new coach, I think the best thing the Raiders can do is say, "Hey, we want to get." Uh, I think Mike LaFleur, right? I think he's an offense coordinator for the Rams. I think the best thing the Raiders can do is say, "Hey, we're going to go out there and get a guy that's a great play caller. He's also a leader of men, right? Your players will look up to this guy, but you got to get a guy that can call plays, and I think that's kind of where it starts. But at the same time, you need to have a good offensive line, right? So we'll see, man. It's so hard right now to know exactly which coach it is. I see someone saying to basically draft Mendoza. Um, Someone said bring Tom Cable back. Someone said Sanjit for general manager. I'm telling you guys, if I was a general manager of the Raiders, I would draft a guard, a tackle. I draft a defensive lineman, defensive end, like with the first 2 picks for like 4 straight years, right? It would just be O line, D line. We wouldn't even get a quarterback, right? It would just be the trenches. That's it. That's all I would draft. um, Sanji, I'm not happy with our top 10 pick. We'll draft the bus. This organization can't draft, and that's the biggest problem. Didn't want Bech or Jeanty. I don't disagree with you, man. The one thing I will say is, Mike Mayock is different than Reggie McKenzie. Those 2 guys are different than Josh McDaniels or Dave Ziegler, I should say. And that's different than Tom Telesco is different than John Spytek. Every general manager is different. They're going to have their own strategy. Now, one of the things that I learned probably just in the last year and a half, as I was going through the Hula Bowl process and kind of learning how the scouting world works, is just because you're a general manager does not mean that you're going to be able to evaluate every single position, and you're going to be able to hit on every single position. There's some guys like Mike Mayock knew how to find good defensive linemen. Mike Mayock brought in a couple of them for the Raiders. Josh McDaniels didn't, or Dave Ziegler did not know how to draft defensive linemen. Right? You look at he drafted Neil Farrell, who he traded after a year. He drafted Byron Young, who was cut after a year. He drafted Tyree Wilson, who's clearly a bust. Not every general manager knows how to properly evaluate every single position. Now, I hope John Spytek knows how to pick offensive linemen or defensive linemen. It's not guaranteed he does, to be honest. He did take Ashton Jeanty over both Kelvin Banks and Armin Membao. But at the same time, he also took Charles Grant. So I think Charles Grant has a ton of upside. And I would not say that without actually feeling like that, right? I was not a fan of DJ Glaze, was not a fan of Thayer Munford. I am an actual fan of Charles Grant, and I do think, if we have a top 10 pick, I do think John Spytek will be able to get it right. I think John Spytek was drafting based off of long term. Now, the Jack Bech pick, I don't disagree with you. I would have much rather had Travion Henderson, who we traded that pick with the Patriots. The Patriots took Travion Henderson with our pick. I would have much rather had Luther Burden, who went one pick later. So there were guys that I'd rather have over Bech, but maybe the Raiders feel like Bech and Jeanty are better value than Membow and Henderson, or whoever else the Raiders could have potentially had, right? And time will tell, right? Time will tell. Similar to time told with the Tyree Wilson pick, right, over Jalen Carter, over Darnell Wright. Time told us that was a bad pick. Same thing with the Alex Leatherwood pick. Should have taken Christian Darrisaw. He was right there on the board. So time will tell if the Jeanty pick is the right pick. And the unfortunate thing is in 3 years, if it's not the right pick, chances are John Spytek will already be fired at that point, right? We'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. Brother May said the fact you moved Jackson Powers-Johnson to right guard after drafting a guard, then Jackson Powers-Johnson goes down and you make your rookie guard a scratch. Damn, I hate the leadership. I could not agree more, man. This is such a beautiful comment right here, because this is exactly what's wrong with the Raiders right now. Literally, this is exactly what's wrong with the Raiders. The leadership, I question it at this point. I question, I question Pete Carroll. I question if he's making the right decisions for the Raiders. I just question it, right? And is he so stuck in this mindset of like, I don't know what's the issue with Jack Sparrows-Johnson and not having him play center? What's the issue with that? All right, to me, there's an issue with JPJ specifically. So I don't know. Really, 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 really unfortunate. Octavia, shout out to you for the $20 super chat. You said, I was tutoring a student who laughed at me for saying I follow the Raiders. And I have to try to make her understand how awesome the Raiders were when I was a kid in 1983, too long ago. We need a Super Bowl ring soon, Sanjit. Could not agree more, man. And I'll say this, there is one thing with the current NFL that I think, maybe it's the NBA that's not really like this, right? Like in the NBA, to win a championship, it could take you 2, 3, 4, 5 years. In the NFL, it just takes 1 year for you to potentially win a championship the next year. If you have pieces, you just need to maybe add 1, 2, or 3 more pieces. Maybe you add an extra offensive line. Maybe it's a coach. Like, think about this. The Rams went from being the Raiders, right, being the laughing stock of the NFL for 15, 20 years. Growing up, the Rams always sucked, for me at least, right, growing up. And out of nowhere, they hire Sean McVay. Now they're competing for a Super Bowl every single year. The 49ers went from, the Harbaugh years, and even before the Harbaugh years, the Niners, same situation, sucked. For at least when I was growing up, they've always kind of sucked. They hired Harbaugh, took him to the championship, took him to the Super Bowl, had all this success. They hired Chip Kelly for 1 year, who sucked ass. And literally after 1 year, Kyle Shanahan was going to become a head coach. It just happened to be that cycle. And the 49ers said, hey, we could either, keep Chip Kelly in the hopes that it works, or we can make the move to get the next, great head coach. And they made that move. And they went out there and they essentially hired Kyle Shanahan, and they're a Super Bowl team every single year. The Raiders got to get their coaching staff right. Obviously, it's a big part of it. I don't really believe in Pete Carroll. I've kind of made that clear. It doesn't mean that I'm out on Chip Kelly. I still think there's something with Chip Kelly. He's shown at least a little bit of upside. So I do hope that at some point Chip Kelly kind of makes it work. I appreciate the comment, Octavius. Hopefully we do win a Super Bowl ring here soon. I know a lot of people became Raider fans in like the 70s, 80s, 90s. When you're young, you obviously end up kind of picking a team. So some people don't have that choice to pick a team. For me personally, I had the choice to pick a team because none of my parents grew up watching football, right? My parents come from a different country. So, being born here in the United States and football obviously kind of being what it is, I started playing football at a really young age, right? I think it was 6th, 7th grade when I started playing. And I had to pick a team, and I picked the Raiders because of the fact that my uncle's a Raider fan. And, it's kind of crazy to think, but like, we've sucked for my entire life. Like I have never watched the Raiders have any sort of success. It's unfortunate, man, but hopefully soon. Hopefully, it only takes 1 year, right? So, hopefully that 1 year happens to be like this upcoming off season. You get the right wide receiver. You revamp you just take a wide receiver with pick one. You take a left guard with pick two. Move JPJ over to the left. Move DJ Glaze over to the left. Put Charles Grant over there on that right tackle position. Maybe that's going to be the next elite offensive line, right? Raiders break my heart. What the hell was that onside kick? Worst I've ever seen ever. I did not even know you can punt the football to try to recover an onside kick. That doesn't even make sense to me, right? Now, surprisingly, I don't know why uh, George Pickens let it bounce. He should have just caught it in the air. At the same time, I don't know why the Raiders players didn't hit George Pickens in that moment or get in front of him to grab the ball. As soon as the ball bounced, you could have grabbed it, right? So that was just like low IQ on those players, right? Whoever it was that was out there should have gotten in front of Pickens and make sure he was not able to grab onto the football there. Um, Unless that's interference, I don't know. I don't really know the rules to punting on an onside kick, but that was unique. So shout out to the special teams coach for knowing the rules and trying something different because you probably were not going to recover the onside if you tried it, the same type of way. Um, I, I don't know why RX. Shout out to you for this. When I got asked that question 5 minutes ago about the coaches, I was trying to think who is the coach that I'm trying to think that's a great coach. We know he's a great coach and he was fired. It was Robert Saleh. So if the Raiders want a great coach, man, Robert Saleh is another guy I'd be all over. I know he's a defensive coach, and it doesn't always work hiring defensive coaches, especially given if your offensive coach is an average offensive coach, and if he's great, he's going to get picked by another team. But if he's average, you might not ever have success. But if you have an elite defense, right? If you have a top 3 to 5 defensive scheme, you can make it work and you can have success. Doesn't always work though, right? Look at Dan Quinn as an example. First year had a great year. Second year, offense doesn't look as good. I know they have some injuries as well. You can even look at Dan Campbell, right? The Lions don't look as good this year, and I know they're still having success, but the Lions are a really, really good, really good team, right? Really good roster. They've done a great job drafting, but with Ben Johnson gone to the Bears, it is clear the Bears are not the same type of offense anymore, right? So, although I would love to bring in Robert Saleh as a head coach, some people even credit Robert Saleh with the success, and Dan Quinn as well, for the success that Pete Carroll has had. Right? Some people think those two coaches were the reason why Pete Carroll had the success that he kind of had. Um, yeah, kind of interesting. Let's get into a couple more of these comments. Uh, Joey said, let's get John Gruden back and get a young quarterback to go with Jeanty and Bowers. Veterans through free agency and trades to fix the offensive line. Sad, but Carroll has to go. I don't disagree with moving off of Pete Carroll. Would you guys be surprised if Pete Carroll actually got fired tomorrow? I kind of would be surprised, but um, I agree with you, man. Like, should the Raiders bring back John Gruden? I don't know about that. I do think John Gruden has, he runs a good offense. I do agree with that, but he makes really bad decisions when it comes to roster building. Even deciding on which coach to hire as your defensive coach, bad decisions, right? Paul Gunther was the first coach that he picked, kept him way too long. Gus Bradley was the second coach he picked, and even Gus Bradley wasn't all that good, right? Um, I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening, man. But I will say this: if John Gruden gets hired to run an offense for someone out there, right? Like, if the Lions hire John Gruden and said, "Come run our offense," John Gruden will make that work, right? He's a good coach, and I hope if he does want to coach again, I hope he gets another opportunity. Drop Geno, fire Chip Kelly, and fire Pete Carroll. Uh, we'll see what ends up happening, right? If you fire all these guys, wouldn't that mean John Spytek's also going to get fired, right? Because I would think John Spytek is a part of this. Or maybe this is the first year Mark Davis is going to separate the two out. All right, we'll see what ends up happening. Captain Yobo Goya said Mark will never care about winning as long as the seats are filled. He keeps on making bad hires. A lot of people don't understand your comment here, man, but I definitely do. Mark Davis definitely cares more about selling tickets than he does about this team actually winning football games. In my opinion, he does. Now, I'll also, to be fair, say this. Mark Davis has done the right things by hiring general managers. He's, sat back and put other people in charge. which I will say is the right move for Mark Davis. But Mark Davis has also said, hey, we're going to keep Derek Carr for way too long. Hey, we're not going to just, one year just tank it out and get a quarterback, right? And more than that, like, whoever is giving Mark Davis advice has not given him the best advice over the years. I don't know if it's Marcel Reese or someone else that was giving this guy advice, but like, Tom Telesco did such a great job for the Raiders last year. And for some reason, we let this guy go. All right, we let Tom Telesco go in a year in which he did a phenomenal job for the Raiders drafting. Drafting's where it's at. Doesn't matter, like, it doesn't matter which quarterback a general manager picks. It literally does not matter. If you draft a good roster, 8 years of good drafting, by year 9, you're going to be a Super Bowl caliber roster and you'll be built for long-term success. Again, look at what the Bears have done, right? Ryan Poles came in, he restarted, he tanked for a couple of years, and he just, revamped the offensive line, and they're still working on the defensive line. It's not great, but like, he just brought in players over the years and he hit on a lot of these players. And the Bears are one of the best teams at this point, and they're still trying to figure it out, and they're not the perfect roster yet. But in 2 years, and then for the next 30 years or however long Ben Johnson wants to be with the Bears, they're going to be a Super Bowl caliber team every year. They're still trying to figure it out, but like, you can just tell when good general managers are put in place and they're making the right decisions. Howie Roseman's done this for years. Ryan Poles obviously does with the Bears. The 49ers do a pretty good job finding under the radar type of players and kind of making it work in their system. Tom Telesco did a pretty good job for the Raiders in that 1 year, and I hope John Spytek kind of ends up being that guy for the Raiders. I appreciate the super chat. I appreciate all the comments from a lot of you guys. Tomorrow we will watch some of the tape. I'm gonna break down the offensive line. I think it'll be fun to just over analyze and just be overly critical. Maybe talk a little bit of shit about some of the guys, and maybe someone can send that video to whoever wanted Will Putnam and Jordan Meredith in there. I think that'll be fun to kind of do. Final super chat right here. Don't send any more super chats, please, you guys. S. Dot, shout out to you for the super chat. I definitely ride or die with you, Sanjit. Shout out to you. But if Chip Kelly would have shown me in times like this that he can adjust and max protect Geno with additional added offensive line instead of 5, I don't disagree with you, man. Who was the team? The Seahawks do this all the time. I'm pretty sure it's the Seahawks. The Seahawks offensive line is their left tackle's pretty good. Their right tackle's pretty good. Their left guard's a rookie. Their center is first year starting. He was a UDFA last year. And their right guard's hurt. They literally have one of the worst right guards starting in the NFL. The Seahawks come out throughout 6 offensive linemen a lot. Like literally, and the 6th offense lineman just blocks. And then sometimes they'll have him run routes, but he's like a 300-pound plus offensive tackle. I agree exactly with what you're saying, right? It would make sense if Geno or if Chip Kelly could do that. But I think we've had plays, and I've noticed this while watching the Raiders tape. There's definitely been plays where the Raiders come out there and say, "Hey, we're gonna keep in all our tight ends. We're gonna have 2 routes downfield, and those should be the only 2 routes." And then what ends up happening, it just kind of gets taken away. So although Geno Smith has all day to throw, well, you have 2 guys going on routes, and you have 4 or 5 guys back there. There's you're not going to be able to complete those passes. I talked about this. I talked about this a lot when the Raiders signed Alex Kappa. But the goal for an offensive line, right, or an offense in general, you have 11 guys out there. You have 5 offensive linemen. You have 5 guys running routes, essentially, and you have your quarterback. The goal should be that your 5 offensive linemen can block the 4 defensive linemen and then the 5th threat on the defense, depending if the defense is going to end up blitzing. The goal should be your 5 offensive linemen can not only block the 4 guys that are coming, but they should be able to dominate those 4 and give your quarterback time. That should be the goal of your offensive line. If you can't do that consistently, you're going to struggle in the NFL. The thing with the Raiders is they can't do that. If you put Will Putnam in a one-on-one against Quinnen Williams is going to beat the shit out of Will Putnam. If you put Jordan Meredith in a one-on-one against Chris Jones is going to beat the crap out of Jordan Meredith. If you put Osa Odigizua on Dylan Parham, he's going to beat Dylan Parham 9 out of 10 times. And right now, the thing is, we have DJ Glaze out there, too, who needs help. We have Stone Forsythe out there who needs help. Our offense line is so bad that the 5 guys that started tonight will probably not start next year on any roster. Some of these guys might not even be. There's a real chance that Will Putnam's not in the NFL next year. There's a real chance Stone Forsythe might not be in the NFL next year, right? Never know. Um, there's a real chance some of these guys, like Dylan Parham's chance he's the backup next year. There's a chance Jordan Meredith, he might be with the Raiders, but there's a chance he's a backup if he even gets picked up next year. Again, I look at the Raiders right now and I say, can our 5 offensive linemen 5-man protect? They can't. So you have to throw an extra tight end in there and a running back, right? So we'll have our running back on one side, our tight end on the other. They'll influence on every single play, which means if you're influencing, you're only going to be the check down options, which now means you only have 3 real routes downfield. So Geno Smith has to take the snap. And there's only 3 routes downfield for Geno Smith. And most of the time, one of those routes is like an alert or a hot. And really, it's a 2-man concept. So really, the Raiders only have 2 guys running routes. If you go and look at the Detroit Lions, for example, the Lions will run 5 guys on real routes because their offense lineman can just handle everything up front. They don't need that extra help the way the Raiders offense line does. So for the Lions, it's much easier to call plays because you literally have 5 guys running routes. You have 2 guys on the left. You have 3 guys on the right. And you have so many options within the route concept. It makes it hard to cover as a defense because there's routes everywhere. And the quarterback can just get the ball to any one of these guys. For the Raiders, you cannot do that because you have to have your 5 offensive linemen. The running back's not running a real route, right? He's going to influence the defensive end. The tight end is going to influence the defensive end on the other side. You get 3 guys out there. So again, John Gruden once talked about this, that how if you're an offensive line that's struggling, you don't have to have the best offense tackles, the best offensive line, because your tight ends and running back could help influence, right? But the issue with that style of offense is you're limiting the explosive plays on the offensive side. If you have 4 or 5 guys running routes, you're going to have chunk plays. The Cowboys did this against the Raiders. The Cowboys struggled today. They still put up 33 points against us. They had plays. George Pickens had a 37-yard catch. CeeDee Lamb a 23-yard catch. The Raiders almost never have like 30-yard plus plays, right? And again, part of it is we're just slow. Too many guys have to stay in to block. So again, it starts with the offensive line. If you can spend the money and get the Kevin Dotson, the the Damian Lewis, the Tyler Smith type of offensive lineman, it makes a huge difference. It really does, right? Either way, man, we'll see what ends up happening. I hope you guys all have a great night. Tomorrow, be on the lookout for the film breakdown. I'm going to be overly critical. We'll be talking some crap about the Raiders offensive line just to be overly critical. I hope you guys all have a great night, and I will see you guys next time.